Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
So we've been talking a lot with other people in the program, as well as we've seen some threads online and some other things like that. We posted about it today, in fact, about what should we focus on, or what matters more for our health and our wellness. Is it more important to be thin, or is it more important to be fit, right? So what's a greater risk to our health, being fat or not being fit? And so that question of what's more important to our health and how can we be, the healthiest, live the longest, live the most full life, what leads to that? And so that's what we want to talk about today, is how to focus on being fit, not on not being fat. So focusing on your fitness is more important than focusing on your fatness. We like to think about weight loss and that somehow equates to being healthy, when actually most of the things that we do to lose weight are wildly unhealthy, and really backfire in our health and fitness. And so we have to be careful there. I've talked to a couple of people actually recently that have had weight loss surgery, who have had major health problems because of that. And so we just have to be careful there. There's a time and a place for that. But by and large, it doesn't mean that you're automatically healthy. And one of those people that I talked with about was in the hospital, actually. Well, two of them actually were in the hospital. Yeah. And they were kind of suffering from some of the consequences of malnourishment and other things because of weight loss surgery. So we have to be careful about what we focus on with our health. Often we like to focus on our fatness, and we use that as the barometer for health, when really that is not the case. And so we want to focus on that today. So, any opening statements, opening arguments, Mark?
Opening arguments.
We should have done that way. We should have done where like you're pro one camp and I'm pro the other camp, and we have like arguments, like a debate.
We should do that sometime.
That would be fun. We're pretty unified in most of our takes on things, but
it's true.
I like to play devil's advocate, so maybe I'll.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's what we have to have. Yeah, you could just take the contrary position. I like that. Make me sweat on screen.
Yeah, that'd be fun one time. Maybe we should do that.
Yes.
Anyway,
yeah,
all right. Yeah.
So I think the key is in that word focus, right? Where is our focus? And we talked about this before, but a lot of the arguments that we see online, that people have one another, is they're talking past each other because their focus isn't even the same, right? They're literally talking about different things, different time frames. And so, like, we talked about I don't remember if it was earlier this week or last week, but that strategy versus tactics, right? Like the right tactics with the wrong strategy, or vice versa, makes both ineffective. And so I think that, like, you'll see so many different viewpoints online, and I just asking yourself the question, like, well, what's the outcome that these people are talking about, or what's the goal, or what's the focus, and does it match what I'm looking to do? And that speaks to the first point of this being short-term focus versus long-term focus. And especially when it comes to weight loss, like in the short-term focus, right, the calories are more important, the weight loss is more important. But if we look at it from the long-term perspective, that while obviously, like, our diet will always be an important part of being healthy, if we miss out on other activities because our diet has left us feeling too fatigued and unable to recover, especially when it regarding exercise, then we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. And so when we look at this idea that we always talk about, how can I be the best 85-year-old? That changes the focus a lot, and it changes it, and it draws it back onto those lifestyle factors, right? What are the things that I'm doing at the level of the lifestyle that are either supporting my goals or that are hindering them? And so being able to look at it that from that point of view of saying, like, what's important now, what's important next week, next month, next year. And when we have that long-term perspective, it helps us have more patience with the journey, right? In developing those healthy lifestyle habits where weight loss, where increased energy come as a byproduct of creating positive habits in each of those lifestyle areas.
Yeah, I 100% agreed. I think so much, like I said before, so much of the short-term focus items really are become wildly unhealthy. When we focus on weight loss or fat loss, we wind up really becoming unhealthy. We wind up slowing our metabolism down. We wind up wasting away muscle and other things. So that's kind of that second point of weight loss doesn't necessarily equal fat loss. So we can lose weight, but often if we're doing it through calorie restriction, the body restricts the calories to the thing that's the most hungry for calories first, and that's our muscles. And so we wind up not losing stored body fat. We wind up burning up, or not feeding anyway, our muscles appropriately. And so we wind up seeing plateaus in people's performance. So less power, so less energy, less focus, less ability to move forcefully. We'll see like how much weight they're lifting decrease. We'll see their cardiovascular improvements plateau, or we'll see them even decline. When people are trying to lose weight during a training cycle, for example, for like a bike race or something, we wind up seeing them actually lose performance if they're trying to lose weight while training for something. And so we have to be careful that weight loss doesn't always equal fat loss. And that can be really dangerous if we're not careful in terms of our overall health and our overall metabolism and our long-term ability to maintain our health and our fitness at a certain level.
To that point, right? The weight loss doesn't necessarily equal fat. That's one of the biggest issues that people have when you look at a variety of diets. So we've said before, what the research constantly bears out is that on pretty much any diet approach, if your calories out are more than calories in, then you can lose weight. And so you see all the different ones, right? Paleo, keto, Atkins, Mediterranean, Blue Zone, right? Any of those different diets is because it's getting you to eat fewer calories than you're taking in. But
so short-term weight loss, usually not long-term though, even if you stick with that diet. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but what they found is that when people end up being a lot more successful long-term when they adopt a protein-sparing calorie restriction period. What I mean by that is that while their overall amount of calories is going down, they're still maintaining a fairly high level of protein. And so when we do that, and then we combine it with continued resistance exercise, that biases us towards keeping muscle, towards maintaining muscle versus losing it. That becomes a big problem with a lot of people in weight loss, is that they focus so much on the getting fewer calories that exercise, it doesn't keep its level of importance, or it's just a lot of cardio, right? There's not a lot of strength training. And the problem is that muscle is important for so many different things, right? Muscle helps with immune function. Muscle stores carbohydrate so that when we eat, like one, it has stored energy for us to use, but it also acts as a kind of a glucose sink, if you will, right? A place to put excess sugar when we eat and insulin releases. We also have fat stores between our muscle fibers. And so when we lose mass, we actually lose some storage and energy capabilities as well as an ability to better regulate our metabolism. And so keeping the focus on maintaining our muscle through adequate protein and regular resistance training as we go through a fat loss phase is really important. You know, we've talked so many times about the importance of maintaining power, right? The ability to use our strength quickly as we age. And if we lose, it goes down way faster than just muscle mass, right? So um, we lose power faster than we lose strength, faster than we lose muscle mass. So if we've lost a significant amount of muscle, we've lost even more ability to use that muscle quickly, right? To use that strength quickly. And so understanding that and also recognizing that sometimes that's a part of the plateaus, right? We're building muscle while we're also losing fat. And so while sometimes the weight on the scale doesn't change, the composition of our body actually is changing. That we're removing some of the fat, especially the unhealthy fat around our organs, and we're building muscle around those areas. And so both of those occurring at the same time, sometimes it can feel like really frustrating when there's a plateau, but actually our body's making positive changes to become stronger, more resilient, and things like that.
Yeah, agreed. And so there's a long-term cycle there too, or long-term approach, I guess, with our fat loss, that we have to stick with things long enough to see those muscle increases, to see those metabolic increases, so that our amount of muscle, in terms of our body fat percentage and our lean muscle, or lean tissue percentage of our body, we have to see that lean tissue percentage increase enough that we ramp up how many calories per hour we can burn and all those types of things before it can really tune up the fat burning machine, if you will. And so weight loss is typically a really slow process if it's going to be kept off, and that's okay. And so fat loss really is not a fast thing typically, especially if we want it to be sustainable. Fat loss is typically a little bit more difficult to achieve, and happens more with just the active lifestyle than it does starvation diets or a high intensity exercise. So again, funny enough, it all comes back to just consistency of our effort and leading that more active lifestyle and letting that work in our favor over enough time. And so, I wish there was a magic bullet or a magic pill in helping that to work. But so far, they have not come up with one. And in the end, it doesn't really matter as much, because there will be no pill for now. They're talking about an exercise pill in terms of helping maintain muscle, but it's still not going to help maintain the nerve muscle connections that are required for coordination and developing of true strength of those muscles. So you may have a higher hypertrophy of those muscles or a higher muscle mass, but if it's not coordinated, well functioning muscle, it's really not going to do us as much good. The benefits of fitness far outweigh the benefits of non-fatness in terms of our overall health, what we can do, how we can function, how it helps preserve and protect our brain and brain function, how it helps us to be more, I guess, capable and more safe as we age, that we're less likely to fall, less likely to have long-term problems, less likely to run into our fitness being the thing that holds us back from participating in our own lifestyle. And that allows us to keep so many other systems healthy in our life. And so as much as being over fat or overweight or obese, or all the different lame terms that we call it, even as much as those aren't good for our health, being unfit is actually the biggest risk to our health out of any of those. Not exercising regularly is the biggest risk to our health of anything. And so those two things combined, being unfit and overweight or overfat, that is a problem. That's a big problem to our health. But actually being fit but fat is a much lower risk to our health. If we're overweight but have a high fitness level, we actually avoid a lot of the health concerns and avoid a lot of the risks to our health. And so that becomes the more important factor. And typically, if we stick with that long enough and keep working at our fitness, as well as, relative diet modification or, our eating pattern, we like to call it our eating pattern, dialing in our eating pattern, that combination tends to lead to the best long-term results. So, the average American eats somewhere around 3,600 to 4,000 calories a day, which for most people, we do our metabolic testing and all that, we see that for most people, especially most women, 16 to 2,000 is kind of 1,600 to 2,000 is usually the sweet spot for most people. Men being between like 1,800 at the low end to like 2,400 to 2,600 at the highest. There's occasionally somebody that's really fit or has a high muscle density that's in the 3,000s or so, but even then, the 3,600 calories a day is too many, and so kind of interesting there how much we overeat compared to our body mass, and so we can have a relative calorie restriction without actually restricting calories. We're just eating less than we normally do, and so that's where just making sure that you're fueling your body right to be able to do the things that you love is good, but we don't necessarily need to restrict calories beyond kind of a normal daily amount, and we can still see fat loss in that process while maintaining our metabolism. And so we have to be careful when we say calorie restriction, or we're trying to watch what we eat, or I'm trying to fix my eating pattern. Even within our program, we still want you to maintain a relatively high amount of calories for somebody that's actively trying to lose body fat. Keeping that calorie amount up long term for your health is going to be important. And honestly, for your fat loss long term is going to be important. This reminds me of the health at every size. Yeah, so it's an interesting debate, I guess. You hear people talk about that a lot. Body positivity and versus, body shaming and things like that are big kind of health trends right now. And there's definitely a spectrum there of risk stratification. So I hate the way we use like the BMI or the way we use those terms of like underweight, overweight, healthy, normal, overweight, obese, and morbidly obese. To me, those are just names and really dumb and just make people feel bad about where they're at. And give people in the healthy, normal range a false sense of security. It's not necessarily just because you're in that range, does that mean that you're healthy? And so I like to use it as a risk stratification. So BMI or other measures is more of a risk stratification than a classification of where you're at. And so risk stratification is a little bit different, meaning somebody that is obese, right, that's considered obese, so that would be over 30 BMI. What that actually means is you have an increased risk or a fairly high risk of adverse health events. Anybody over about 25 BMI is at increased risk for adverse health events. People between like 21 and 24, the mid 20s of BMI, they actually are kind of at the lower end of the risk stratification. People under 21, and your risk starts to climb back up, even though that's in the healthy, normal range. Under 21, and you start to see risks kind of on the other end of things. So the risk associated with your BMI is a U-shaped curve, where kind of 21 to 24 is at the bottom of that U-shaped curve, and then kind of branching out from that is being under 21 and over 24. And so it's important to remember that it's not all just about fatness, it's about the risks to your health, and that's more important to focus on than what that name means or things like that. And so focusing on the risks to your health that can come with increased body mass, that's more important to focus on. And really thinking, if I can stay fit even at an increased body mass, long term I'm going to be better off, and I'm more likely to bring that number down into a healthier range over time if I can be consistent with it. And so that's more of the focus of our program, is staying in that consistency zone with our fitness and working on our diet slowly over time, our eating pattern slowly over time, until we see those changes in our health, in our body, but we're using fitness as the primary tool to improve our health. And that seems to be the biggest difference maker long term and for our overall health risks. So hopefully that made sense and wasn't too convoluted. And I know this is a touchy subject for a lot of people. But what we see is the more people focus just on fat, the more they get stuck, for one, and two, the more their weight yo-yos and they actually get stuck in pretty unhealthy patterns long term. So I'll give Mark a chance to talk, because I've been going off. I just got up on my soapbox.
Gotta have those. So going back to what Cameron said about the consistency, we've talked on here many times about how motivation is an exhaustible resource, right? It's a fatigable resource. And so a lot of times in our push to lose weight, it's a heavy reliance on motivation. And the problem is that eventually we all burn out. Versus if we can set up those simple, sustainable habits that allow us to keep exercising regularly over a long period of time, that move us towards eating in a way that fuels us well for activity, for exercise, and for recovery, then again, those things come as a byproduct. Because when we do things at the level of the habit, it becomes automatic, right? We don't have to expend a bunch of mental energy to make the choice to do the thing. It just happens as a natural reaction. Again, things as simple as brushing your teeth or making your bed, right? When we don't do it, we feel more resistance with habits. And so being able to do things as a habit, it's going to require us that we don't make these huge overhauls, right? We don't do these big swings, because then we won't be able to habitify it. And so thinking about how can I habitify some of those lifestyle changes makes a difference. And Cameron said a really important thing. He said relative calorie restriction. And so there's lots of different ways that we can change the scales on that equation, right, of calories in, calories out. And doing simple things like just adding in more activity, even non-exercise activity throughout the day, that can actually make a huge difference when you add up that over months, right? So instead of just a single 45-minute workout in a day, right, I still do my strength training, my cardio, but I'm just taking little movement snacks at other times throughout the day, right? I'm just regularly moving a little bit more. And over time, that extra movement ends up adding up. And again, it kind of turns to the level of the habit. Our brains want to stay within kind of a set point, right? And when we make big changes, sometimes that set point can change, but there's typically a lot of resistance to that. And so if we can, instead of trying to slam into a new set point, if again, we just do it methodically, then it becomes a lot easier. It's a lot more comfortable. And again, we can impact so many of those different factors on the scale. Sleep and stress play a huge role in our body's ability to regulate that. So Lisa Feldman Barrett, she's a neuroscientist. She said a really interesting thing about stress. So when our levels of stress are higher over time, when we eat a meal, we actually we don't burn as much energy in processing that meal when we're highly stressed. And so again, that's something that can add up over time. And so when we do things like manage our stress appropriately, when we get enough sleep, those different systems that balance how our body uses and processes energy can change on the positive end when we adopt those good habits, and on the negative end when we have some more of those habits that aren't really working towards our goals. And so understanding that there's a lot of things that we can do to affect energy balance versus just restricting how much we're eating. Right? There's so many different things that play into that, and all of our different body systems. And so looking at each of those different areas of health and figuring out where are my weak spots, right? Do I have some issues with stress management? Do I have some issues with sleep? Can I include more activity, right? How am I doing in each of those areas? And making changes accordingly. Let's see what Christy said.
Nice.
I set my work treadmill up in my office last night. I'm going to be able to use it without disturbing the household now. So this will be more of those bites of movement. Great. So that's such a fantastic application of this principle, right? Of just a simple change and finding ways to get more activity, right? Those little bites of movement. I like how you said that. I think that's a great way. Just what are little, small, simple, sustainable things that I can do to tip the scales?
Right. So all those little things add up in the long run. And so that kind of comes to our final point. It's more of a statement than a discussion point. But I would say, you've heard us say that before, and I like this phrase. You can't outrun a bad diet, but you also can't eat your way to fitness, right? There's no amount of clean eating or healthy eating or any specific diet that will make you more fit. And so it's kind of both sides of the equation. Yes, if no amount of exercise can kind of undo a terrible diet. But at the same time, you can't just from diet alone get all of the benefits of being fit. And so it requires both sides of that equation. And like we've said, health requires all of those other things, healthy relationships, sleep, stress management, good mental health, all of the above. All of that is incorporated, encapsulated into a healthy person and a healthy lifestyle. And we could get deeper into the biopsychosocial, the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, all those layers of what leads to somebody being and feeling healthy. But really, diet and exercise seem to always be the two big topics that wind up coming up because they both require some discipline, but really require consistency to be good at. We're gonna sleep either way. Now the quality of our sleep can vary quite a bit, but eventually we're gonna sleep. But that doesn't mean that we're eventually gonna eat well or we're eventually gonna exercise. And stress comes and goes, right? It often comes more than it goes, unfortunately. But the thing that we're stressing about comes and goes. But whether or not I exercise or whether or not I eat, that's kind of one of those constant pressures. And so as those go, so much of the rest of our life. And so we tend to focus on those aspects quite a bit because they really are some of the major players. And so you definitely can't have one without the other. At the same time, in terms of what makes the biggest difference in our health, it actually is our fitness. Staying fit is more important than just about anything else. And as we do that, it naturally does inspire us and help us to do better with our diet as well. And so, like you definitely need a balance there. But I feel like if we focus on fitness and then be patient with ourselves in making those changes in our eating patterns, we'll see, our diet change over time, and we'll see our weight change over time. And that time can sometimes be a long time. We're talking years, but that's okay because we typically didn't put that weight on in a few months. It also took us years of cycling our weight up. And so it's okay that it takes years to cycle our weight back down. And so don't feel like, oh, but if I just lose this weight, then I'll focus on the lifestyle piece or whatever. Statistically speaking, it just doesn't happen. And so let's focus on fitness and then slowly modifying those aspects of our eating pattern that help us to be successful in the long run. And we see that tend to be the most successful, profitable way of doing it. Anyway, any final thoughts, Mark?
No, that's all.
That's all, folks. All right. Thanks for joining us on this rainy, snowy Tuesday evening. We look forward to seeing you all again on Thursday. Thanks again for joining, and we will see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.